Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. Except perhaps you're not returning to the old world at all. Perhaps you're new to the game or just looking to get into Warhammer for the first time. And maybe you've got some questions. You've seen things online and you want to explore those things, those theories, those questions a little bit further. So with no further ado, I'd like to offer you my take on 4 key questions I think that are coming up on the internet and worthy of discussion for you as someone interested in getting into this game. What is the first? What is the elephant in the room? Games Workshop. Isn't it really expensive? And the simple answer to that is yes, it is. As a hobby, it is expensive to get into. But there are nuances to that answer. So let's explore those. So yes, it is expensive. If you want to play a Warhammer game, Warhammer 40,000, a mass combat game in a Warhammer event or at a Warhammer store. So if you want to go to your official Games Workshop shop, they will insist that you use their figures. Fair enough, but that adds a premium because Games Workshop stuff is expensive. And yes, you're paying a bit of a premium because for many, many years, Games Workshop has led the market really in quality of figures. But that thing is changing. So if you don't mind playing outside of a Warhammer store, if you don't mind not playing the official Games Workshop events, you will find the doors open up to a wider range of models that you can use. And this really comes from the rise of third-party miniatures and 3D printing. I did a series of videos a little while ago on a range of third-party providers, but it's worth just touching on this a little bit more depth here. When Warhammer Fantasy Battle was in, I suppose coming up towards its final throes, we're talking 8-9 years ago, if you wanted to play a human faction, Bretonnians, Empire, yes, you had options outside of Games Workshop. There was a whole range of historical miniatures that you could choose from. Any other race, however, things were a little bit more difficult. The market was a lot more constrained, and the quality difference between Games Workshop and its rivals at the time was gigantic. If you look at the old Mantic sculpts, for example, on their website, things like the dwarves, some of the undead models, they're really not good models. They're smaller, they're weedier, they're lack the detail. They're just nowhere near as good as Games Workshop, but they were a fraction of the price. Fast forward nearly a decade, and there's not only a much wider range of companies out there doing fantasy models at a scale equivalent to Warhammer, but the quality of those models has massively improved. Yes, cost for some of these ranges can also be a little on the chunkier side, but you can find a lot of value. I made a dwarf army in readiness for the release of Warhammer The Old World, and I was paying less than £1 a figure for those dwarves, which is a really good value collection, certainly when compared to Games Workshop. And value is another thing when we're also talking about price, because it's not just a case of I buy a model, it costs X, and I need to get that much value out of the model in games. Because the hobby is quite a wide thing. There's a lot of ways you're going to get enjoyment out of the figures that you buy. There's the collecting process, the building process, painting them up, playing the games. Not everyone takes a lot of enjoyment out of all of those elements, but actually you'll be handling these models potentially for quite a few hours. And once you're up and running, you'll really start to earn back that value put in from a monetary form. So yes, the buy-in for a 2,000 point army for Warhammer 40,000, for Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer The Old World, Yes, it is expensive, and if you're buying Games Workshop figures, you're paying that premium, particularly if you go direct to Games Workshop. A lot of figures you might want are probably online only now as well, or Games Workshop Direct only. That's stopping third-party providers that sell at a discount getting their hands on them, which is another way you can save money. Check out your friendly local gaming store. They may well have Warhammer products on it, somewhere between 10 to 20% off. So overall, yes, it can be expensive, but actually over the longer term, you can think about the value you're going to get back from the hobby. And there's also loads and loads of ways of making savings during that collecting and building process, be it third-party providers, be it your friendly local gaming store, or 3D prints. Let's move on. Question number 2. Is the community welcoming? Really important question, I think, for anyone going into a new hobby, particularly one with a social aspect, is am I going to like the people who play this game? Now, that is a difficult one to answer because obviously who you get on with is a bit of an unknown outside of you personally. However, I would say that the community is fairly large. It's a broad church. A lot of different types of people come and play Warhammer. At the club I go to, you'll find anything from office-based professionals to shop assistants to manual labourers to you name it. It's a really broad range of people brought together by their common interest in the game. Now, sure, as in any community where there is the possibility of competition, so in this case tournament play, you're going to get some people who are pushing that. They're what's known as whack or win at all costs people, but they definitely feel like they're in a minority. They can be quite vocal online. Check out your local club, check out the local scene. You'll probably find you've got very few, if any, of those sort of people floating around. Generally, I've found the community for Warhammer, it is welcoming, it is helpful, and everyone just wants everyone else to get the best out of their hobby and help each other lift ourselves up as a group. Talking of community, let's address number 3. Is the game dead? Is it lacking support? This also goes hand in hand with a description you might see often online. Warhammer Old World is a game designed to fail and was only really pushed out as a way to compete with Kings of War 3rd edition and to drive down sales of a competitor. Now, Warhammer Old World isn't a mainline game. It's never pretended to be a mainline game in the way that Warhammer Fantasy was. So we can't expect a release cycle that looks like Warhammer 40,000 where there's stuff coming out pretty much every single month, and the same being true of Age of Sigmar. Now, as I mentioned in my answer to question or thought number 2, there is a community. There's quite a few people out there playing the games. Yes, it's not as big as 40,000. Yes, the tournaments, if you look at how many people are playing in those, you're not getting the super majors and stuff flying around all over the place as you are with other games. It's only been around for 9-ish months. And I think whilst there are some challenges around the wording, rules, etc., I think the game overall has been pretty well received. As for it's a game designed to fail, I don't think Games Workshop would throw a load of resource at bringing out a game it had no interest in seeing a return from. That's just not good business. And I think we need to be very careful listening to the over-pessimistic voices on the internet who are, let's face it, probably being incredibly pessimistic for their own purposes. The same is true, of course, of people being overly optimistic and excited. It's about taking a balanced view. But is it a dead game? I don't think so. Is the game getting no support? No, it's not. It's slow support. We're not going to see any more armies coming out until 2025. But I do get the impression that there is going to be a trickle of support continuing down the line. Final point, the game is difficult to learn. Warhammer The Old World has a lot of rules. That is absolutely the case. And I think the rulebook actually is pretty good for a Warhammer product. The flow's pretty good. The layout's probably one of the best Warhammer rulebooks I've ever seen when it comes to that sort of thing. But it does suffer from the usual problems of the wording of the rules can be somewhat open to interpretation. They're not as tightly written as you perhaps would like. And as I say, there's a lot of them. Other gaming systems will offer a tighter rule set, and they will offer a smaller rule set. However, it kind of depends what sort of a game you want. The current offering of Warhammer The Old World is very different to other fantasy games I've seen out there. It's very different to Oathmark. It plays very differently to Kings of War. It's more the mighty hero type approach than maybe as much of a rank and flank game as those other games which rely more on the bog standard basic infantryman. Now, I've played Warhammer for many, many years across several editions of Warhammer Fantasy and now Warhammer The Old World, so it does make me struggle to reach a purely objective conclusion around, is Warhammer The Old World difficult to learn? And yes, I've had my brain muddled slightly, so I've kind of thought old version of the rules still applied and things like that. But overall, I think after a few games, your matches tend to flow fairly well. It's fairly easy to pick up the rules, and often is the case where even if you don't know the rule, it feels right that there should be something there, so you know to go and look something up. The rules aren't so obscure that you can completely miss big chunks of them without realising that you should be interacting with some kind of rule. So for that, I think once you get going, it's not too bad. It's not that complicated in order to learn how to play the game. So there we have it, 4 thoughts that you may be wondering about if you're now thinking about getting into Warhammer The Old World. In the sense of timing, as I mentioned, we're not seeing any new factions coming out until 2025. And what does this mean? Well, it means actually I think the meta of the game is going to now have a few months of consistency before we see any major changes. So it means you've got a good time to get a handle on the game. It's not like something like Warhammer 40,000 where there's so much stuff coming out all of the time. Just the way the game plays changes so often. That's before you get all the FAQs and the balanced data sheets, etc. coming in, which can completely alter the game entirely. Now would seem a good time to pick things up if that's what you're looking to do. Start learning the game because you have got this window of opportunity where things are probably going to be fairly calm, fairly consistent. All that remains for me today is thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you found it useful. If you do like it, do check out the back catalogue. Think about dropping a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It's the best ways you can help a small channel such as this one, in addition to giving a few minutes of your time. Once again, thank you very much for listening. I am Return to the Old World. Have a great day.